And we're back. Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder news, reviews, and interviews podcast. I'm Vanessa Hoskins.
And I'm Luis Loza.
And we're talking about a book that, Luis, that you had a very important hand in making, The Lost Omens Travel Guide.
Oh, yes. This is a very special book, very near and dear to my heart. I think one that I've been trying to work on for pretty much since they handed me the Lost Omens line. It's been something that I've been trying to do for a while, and I'm glad to see that it's almost out, just a few weeks away, and can be in everyone's hands.
Subscribers are starting to get it already. So if you are a subscriber to the Lost Omens line, you may have the PDF already as your book is on its way. But yeah, not quite street date yet, but still, we're going to talk all about it. This is such a cool book. So this, correct me if I'm wrong, this book is like the lore guide, essentially. It's weather and trade routes and fashion and food and festivals and all sorts of just really cool stuff about like just what it's like to live in Galarian, not necessarily an adventurer, but just, I gotta go get my milk and like take my kids to school, that sort of.
Yeah, I like to call it two different things. One, either it's the guide to playing an NPC in Galarian, or it's the guide for everything that isn't adventuring, because a lot of the Lost Omens books, other setting books, focus on things like adventuring sites, dungeons, monsters, NPCs, all the stuff that you'll encounter in adventures,
Sure.
which makes a lot of sense for, our adventure RPG. But I am of the opinion that all this stuff, like, what you just said, festivals and cuisine and all that stuff, is just as interesting, if not more so in some cases. And I've wanted to do a book that focused on that for a long time.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think Parham would call it Ultimate Commoner, right? Out of the first edition line.
Yeah.
And it definitely has that feel where, like I said, it's literally one of the chapters is everyday life. But you can look at all sorts of these things and like crime and law and how are these things dealt with? What's the climate like in different areas? One of them is just called What People Know, which is great because like we know all this great Galarian lore, and going into it as a player, you might be like, oh, I know that the throne in Corvosa is cursed, right? Because there was a whole adventure path about it. I know about all of these other things that are happening. I know about the Whispering Tyrant and on his deal and his like extended history. Cool. But what do like random commoners know if you just walk up and you're like, I don't know, gather information, make a diplomacy check. Like, sure, the APs will tell you the relevant stuff there, but there's also just like, do they know the Whispering Tyrant is out? What do they know about that?
About the Starstone?
Yeah, how much do they actually know about the Starstone? Or is that one of these weird myths that people are like, oh, sure, you can become a god, whatever. That's all the way over in Absalom. I don't think that exists. That's a tourist attraction. I bet that's not real. They wouldn't just have a rock that made people gods. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, so it's just a way to sell you the gift shop.
That's right. Come, get your own piece of the Starstone. Just chipped off the old block this morning. That actually would be a fantastic, like, fake touristy thing to sell.
Yeah, actually, now that I think about it.
I've only got 5 pieces left. They're 10 gold pieces a pop. If you want a piece of the actual Starstone that might grant you divine powers, it's only 10 gold pieces.
I touched the Starstone and all I got was a Slazy t-shirt.
Yes. Right? Oh, my goodness. Well, let's dig into it. Oh, actually, I wanted to ask you a question. This book has so much stuff in it. How did you, 1, figure out what you wanted to put in it, and 2, figure out how to properly organize it?
Oh, boy. That was part of the challenge of the book in the first place, is deciding what to put in there. Because when I think, okay, what doesn't relate to adventuring, that's imagine the entirety of knowledge as a pie chart. It's like, all right, here's this slice. Okay, now just put everything else in there. No problem. Fit that into 128 pages. Which, if you ask me, this book should have been 4 times longer. But I worked with what I had.
It could be 4 times longer. Just reading through it, there's all sorts of bits that are touched on that you're like, this one paragraph could be a whole spread. Could be a whole
I think pretty much each section, so like trade and cuisine and whatever, could each be their own Lost Omens book. And would only be mildly satisfied with the amount of content we put out. But yeah, that's just me. But the thing that came to mind is, okay, what are the important details that I think I, as a GM or I, as a player, have run into where I've wanted to know a thing? You know, I think a lot of people want to know what food is available, or things like who is the shopkeep, right? And we've answered some of those questions with the Lost Omens line before. We had the Grand Bazaar as your answers, like who's a shopkeep? All right, well, you can just flip to a page and here's your shopkeep. You have it ready to go. No big
Mhm.
deal. But things like food, or what sports are being played, or what people know, which is actually a question I didn't realize people had until I saw it on the Paizo forums while this book was getting kind of brainstormed and put together. Um, just kind of little details that I think are interesting to read and useful for fleshing out the world. Every once in a while, when I'm running a game, my players will ask me this kind of out of nowhere question. One time, someone asked me like, "Oh, hey, what does Druidic sound like?"
Oh yeah.
What does Druidic sound like? I don't know, and I didn't answer it here because there's just not enough space. But in my home game, I decided, okay, what it sounds like is there's lots of like S sounds and shushes and things that sound like natural sounds, that like if you're listening to the sound of of leaves rustling in the wind, you can speak Druidic, and the sounds of nature will mask it, and no one will know that you're speaking Druidic because all you're hearing is natural sounds.
That's
And
really
it's
cool.
like
I like that.
details like that will happen. Or I was running my Ruins of Azlant game, players were underwater, and they go to the city bar, the underwater city bar. It's like, hey, what can we get to drink? But also, how do drinks work underwater here? And
Oh
I
yeah.
talked about this whole thing about like water density, and like their alcohols have like specific density, so they have a glass of water, or a glass of underwater booze that they were handed that still works underwater, and you can still drink it same way because it doesn't just like mix with water. So like details like that happen. And I've realized, I'm sure there are so many GMs, so many players that have those same questions, or similar questions. Let's try to answer some of those. Let's scratch the
Sure.
surface at least a little bit, so people
Yes.
feel like they are informed enough to answer the question, what's for dinner at the inn? Or at least have enough of a knowledge base to know, okay, well, I know what housing costs are.
Hmm.
We can use that as a jumping off point to figure out how much this new manor that you've
Yes.
just inherited is worth, and all that stuff.
Well, some of the things were interesting to me. So, as an American, I'm used to eating beef all the time, right? We got
Mm-hmm.
hamburgers, we got steak. There's beef and everything, ground beef and all sorts of stuff. And one thing that was interesting to me in the culinary chapter was it talked about like, yeah, beef is kind of rare. Like it
Mm-hmm.
really only exists near big cities that have their own farmland, because you need this dichotomy of enough people to like eat not only just like, oh, we have one cow that we slaughtered, but you need enough to have like, oh, we have a whole herd that's going to support people, and
Yeah.
also at the same time enough like grazing land for them to exist. And in the modern world, like you have people globally, and you have all this like ways to ship things all over the place, and so it's not as big of a question. But in a fantasy world, yeah, you can't just have a small farming community and a herd of cattle and be like, well, what do we do with all these cows? You know, we eat one and that's enough for the whole city for several nights and several
Mm-hmm.
days, and then what? So
And
sort of makes
also,
sense.
we needed it for its milk first, so like
And you need it for
we're
its
not going
milk
to just
first, yeah.
like slaughter it we're not going to be slaughtering a cow every week just
Every week,
for
just
sake.
yeah, so people can have meat, yeah, because people
Yeah.
need milk from it. So
That's why you have your chickens and you eat eggs instead, right? You
yeah,
just deal. It's a luxury to
yeah.
sometimes eat meat.
Exactly. And so that was kind of cool to think about in those terms and just sort of reframe things that we are used to into something that you go, ah, yes, that would make sense.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I appreciated is that even though there's a fashion chapter, you have fashion sprinkled all throughout the book.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at like rural stuff. There's a rural fashion, and it shows a guy, and it talks about what he's wearing, and it talks about other things folks might wear. And I just think that's kind of cool because as I go through the cure, I get really inspired, right? I start reading and I'm like, oh, that's a really cool little bit of information, or that's a cool outfit or something that I can look at and say, I want to make a character like that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the inspirations with this book is when I was growing up, I would see these eyewitness books or like these Star Wars visual encyclopedias that would, have just a bunch of art. It would have, here's a statue, and it would point to different parts of the statue. It's like sculptors would use blah 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 techniques, and
Mhm.
just give you all these little facts, little pop-up video style, like extra little facts. Or you would see the dissection of, I don't know, a Star Destroyer in one of these Star Wars books, and you can
Mhm.
see all the different floors and where the engines are and where the
Right.
weapons are and where
It's
the
not
crew
just a big
sleeps.
triangle of doom anymore.
Yeah, and then it would also point out like, oh, here's what the engines are,
Mhm.
and here's what they do, and how many crew are manning them, and stuff like that. And just
Yeah.
like seeing that, I think, helps sell and understand a lot of this stuff a lot better than just telling you, well, people live in houses and here's the type of houses they have. But no, we can just show you a picture of a house and show you the rooms and the layout and the kind of expected stuff. And then if you really wanted to, you can even use that for your games. It's like, oh, here's an example house. Cool. I'll use that layout for the murder mystery I'm about to run or whatever.
Mhm.
And just having the visuals, I think, really sells you, and it helps. I mean, it's that thing, picture
Right.
worth being worth 1,000 words. It's just so much more helpful, I think.
Yeah, 100%. We have a question from a first-time chatter. Snow and Armor asks, will there be recipes to create actual in-game dishes like there was in Mwangi Expanse?
Oh boy, will there? Yes, there are. There are not only, there's two main dishes here. We have our baked fish, Diabellian baked fish, and Thuvian spice meat pastries, but there's also a couple of cocktails if you're more inclined
There are.
for spirits.
There are. I was so excited. So there's only the one spread, but there are a couple dishes you can make, and there are 4 cocktails. And what's fun is if you look at them, I am 90% sure I know what real life cocktails these mimic, but still, they are delicious. Speaking of cocktails, one of the things that I thought was really fun is that there's a specific type of wine called Carpendon that comes from the Carpendon Hills in Taldor.
Mhm.
That is a generally a white wine that has extra sugars and things put in it for a double fermentation, so it's bubbly, and commonly called bubble wine. But it's only Carpendon if it's from the Carpendon Hills of Taldor. Otherwise, it's just bubble wine.
Yep. There's so many fun details in this book. There's like, not to say that our other Lost Omens books or rule books are boring, but the
They're
the
not.
the intentional decision to make this be actual articles written in setting from authors and travel guides.
Hmm.
Essentially, you're looking at a collection of blog posts from different people who are visiting the inner sea and saying like, oh, if you want food, I got all the best information for you. But it also means they inject their personality and have these opinions about things, like, hey, whatever, you can make this drink without Carpendon, but like, what was it even worth it anymore at that point?
That's right.
Right. Stuff like that. So like getting these things, or like little jokes that they intersperse here and there, I think really adds to the enjoyability of reading it.
Mhm. Well, as an author, I really enjoy having a resource like this too, because then I know when I'm writing an adventure, I can have like that dusty old bottle of Carpendon that's,
Mhm.
in someone's wine cellar. And it's like, yeah, they've got a lot of wine, but this one's worth some serious gold. And it's cool because not only can I just put a piece of treasure essentially in there that's, the players are probably just going to take it and sell it, sure. But it's more than you find a box of coins in the cellar. Congratulations, here's treasure. Like you
Mhm.
can really, and I could always say, oh, there's a rare wine, but it's not as grounded in the world. And this lets me say, this fits the larger narrative of Galarian and everything that we're putting into it.
Some of the most fun I've had with reading adventures is the occasional big social adventure, like in Hell's Rebels Part 3, for example.
Mhm.
Has a dinner that you go to, and it talks about all the different courses, and it goes into detail about like, oh, here's this dish, and it's these fish, and then you skewer them in a particular way, and stuff like that. And I'd always see that. Or like even Rise of the Moonlords Part 1 mentions the like cooking contests that
Mhm.
Ameko Kaijitsu wins with her specific like fish dish, and like it's always been a thing in the background. And like part of the reason I wanted to do this book is like go through every single publication and gather
Jeez.
everything. We didn't have space for that,
Mhm.
it turns out, but that was part of the original idea. Is like, I'm going to make this giant living resource as a research material that's like so far, here's every mention of food that we've ever included in an AP or a setting book.
Mm.
And turns out that's a lot more work than it sounds like.
Oh yeah, no, that's a
I
ton.
I managed to do that and go through and collect most holidays and events, I think, and like not even like 20% of them fit in this book ultimately. But I had the
Wow.
giant list that I handed to the freelancers, like, here's all of them, grab what you want, and here's the pages where I found that information. So it'd be it's just a lot of cool stuff that has been mentioned in the history of Pathfinder. And if you're not someone who's read that particular adventure, you wouldn't know about this particular dish. Or if you were the player, and you just didn't experience it or whatever. And I think it's just a fun way to give you that feeling that I felt I had. It's like, oh, cool, they do this and that with their food, or
Yeah.
do that with their sports. And you're taking a glance into a world. I think other settings,
Hmm.
not just RPG settings, but like, there was like a Game of Thrones cookbook and stuff that based itself on stuff
Sure.
within the setting. Like this kind of stuff happens all the time, and it's fun to finally see Pathfinder get its chance to have that happen.
Absolutely. One of the things that I appreciate looking through here is the stories it does create by inspiration. As you know, I
Mhm.
also am one of the two co-authors of Vellum and Lace, a series of fiction on Pathfinder Infinite. And even just like skimming through the book, looking at different things, I'm writing to Helen, my co-author. I'm like, ooh, we happen to be in the right month where this like festival of kites is going to happen soon. So maybe that can be like a plot point or a chase or something that we can put in the story. Maybe one of the characters has a birthday. We decided when their birthdays are because maybe they have a birthday celebration and it talks about like how birthdays in Galarian are celebrated in a very specific way. And there's sort of like a non-religious way to do it and a more religious way to do it. And both of those seemed really intriguing to me, and like things I'm like, oh, this could definitely be a scene or two in our story that, aids to building the world and building the characters. And as I'm going through here, there's just a ton of stuff that I keep finding snippets and copying and pasting them to her. And it's just like from now on, everything I send that's quoted to you is from the travel guide that we can use.
There's so much in there that was just like extra little fun bits that our authors included, or random Easter eggs that I decided to include,
Mm-hmm.
because not all of this was written when it was through the writing period, if that makes any sense. For example, there's the calendar in the calendar section. There's like a little 1 month someone's calendar has details written in, specifically it notes it's Ezrin's calendar, so that's fun. But that didn't
Yeah.
exist until our art team laid it out, and then I had to go in and fill in that stuff. And that's when I reached out to the rest of the team and asked, like, do any of the iconics have birthdays?
Mm-hmm.
And turns out none of them did. So I decided we're going to declare that Valeros's birthday happens on the 10th of Erastus.
Oh yeah, there it
And
is.
now you can, so there's like little bits like that. And there's so many like little things I've hidden in there, or other authors have included, or are bits in the art here and there that are just like allusions to other things within Galarian or other APs and
Yeah.
stuff. So it's really fun for someone who, even if you know Galarian very well, you're obviously going to learn a lot of stuff, but also be able to point at things like, oh, Valoros's birthday. It turns out that's when his birthday is. That's pretty fun. And, so next July 10th, we can all like jump on Twitter and tell Valoros happy birthday. It's a shame this book came out like just a little too late
Yes.
for that, but we can do that next year.
Okay. Next up is Lost Omens Big Book of Birthdays. You heard it
Big
here, folks.
Lost Omens little black book where it's just phone
Ooh.
numbers
Oh,
and,
wow.
and
That's
birthdays
I bet
and
that belongs to Mauricio, actually. If I know
uh
her. And then
yeah.
Kira finds it. It's like, what is this? It's like, that was from 50 years ago. Most of those people have like grown old and gone on. It's fine, except for
Some
this
of
guy. He's gonna be around for a while. But yeah, that's so cool. We have another question from chat. Suggestion really from Numbat18 about sort of extending the volumes maybe through infinite for authors that want to drill down on a specific section. And I think
so
I think they're wondering if there's like the lists of all the stuff that you compiled available for infinite authors.
I don't know, because I that's technically something I did for work, so I guess it's technically Paizo work, but like you could do what I did, which is just start going through the PDFs. I have my all my PDFs there, and I like controlled F holiday, and it it did a search through all the AP books and stuff, and I was just starting to grab everything I could. So I don't know if it's I'm sure someone can eventually do that and do the same with food and animals and clothing styles and stuff like that. That'd be amazing. That would, but that's also basically asking people, hey, be a research, or do research work, be a grad student, and dedicate so much of your time to just doing this for a fictional world.
Mm-hmm.
Which is part of the reason I realized I couldn't do that, because I can't just pay someone the rates that would be required to do that extensive of research.
Yes, but that's why I like this book so much,
Mhm,
because you have done some of the research, you paid
mhm,
freelancers to do some of that research, and also to create a bunch of new things that is now canon Galarian lore
yeah.
for how this stuff works. So now GMs making their own home campaigns, people that are also writing for the setting, people that are playing Pathfinder Society and really want to make sure that they get the feel of their home area correct. If you're going to make someone from Galt, there's a bit in there about different like silverware, and how in Galt
Mhm,
you don't use silverware, you use pewter, and they prefer pewter because otherwise people might get the wrong idea in Galt. And so,
right.
now you might have this quirk where it's not a big deal, but you go to sit down and you're like, I prefer a wooden bowl, please, and I
Mhm.
prefer a
Yeah.
pewter, a pewter
I'm
fork, if
hoping
possible.
that so many people read this book and grab just like one detail that they can add to their character or add to
Hmm.
their game. Like, hey, we're about to run a murder mystery, but now I know exactly what the uh, punishment for murder is, says the GM, right? And I can like include that, and or include one of the detectives that's mentioned in the section, stuff like that. Just hopefully everyone can grab something and make use of it with this book, even if they don't end up playing a
Hmm.
character. It's like, I know all the different recipes from Catapesh or anything like
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
did we want to show off a little bit of this book?
Yes, one thing I specifically wanted to show off is the first time I have ever seen this in any Pathfinder product, and maybe it's been done before, but this is the first time I've seen it, is isometric maps. So you've got several in here. Right now, we're going to
Yes.
look at the interior designs for rural and urban homes. And they're
Mhm.
these really cool isometric maps with a bunch of those, like you called them pop up video style callouts that
Mhm.
go and look at specific features of like what is unique about a rural home or what is unique about an urban home. One of the things that didn't occur to me is it talked about how, like, an iron stove is a pretty rare thing. And
Yeah.
generally, stoves are wood or stone, and they are
Mhm.
built for like a specific temperature, right? This is a
Yeah.
pizza oven. This is for bread. This is for drying fruit. Like, ovens are going to be designed for very specific things, as opposed to modern day ovens, which have variable temperatures.
That the thing I mentioned earlier with the books that were inspirations for this, the cutaway things. Like, I want to have some of these maps. I worked with our art team, specifically Sonia on the art team was kind of my go-to for most of this book. And I know we haven't really done too many isometric maps because they're cool looking. They look awesome. And I know Paizo used to do them in the magazine eras. I've
Oh,
seen a
did they?
couple of
Okay.
them.
Been a long
I
time.
remember seeing them in like Age of Worms and stuff. But the thing is, then it makes it really hard to translate onto paper or onto the battle mat, because you have to like turn it in your head. And there are some things you can't see because there's a wall, and it blocks sight of
Hmm.
stuff like that. But that means we don't end up doing a lot of those for battle maps. But I asked Sonia and Sarah at the time with our art team, hey, can we do this if it's not a map for intended for to have a grid or anything? They're like, oh yeah, that's fine. And
Oh,
suddenly,
cool.
okay, I'm going to do a bunch of these. And I think it really helps to give you that bird's eye view, and also give you enough of the details, because you can cut away the walls that you need, and reveal as much as you need. And I think it's also just really fun. I think I'm sure there are artists that really enjoy doing that in that style, and have a lot of fun, and maybe haven't even had a chance to work with us before because they only do that style. So hey,
Right.
hopefully we'll get to see more of that kind of stuff in the future, because I think there are benefits in terms of information that you could provide. If there's like a
Hmm.
city built into underground or something, it's a lot
Yeah.
easier to see the layers that way than just expect to like look at it from above.
Yes. Well, and I'm just thinking about some of these set piece maps from actual adventures. You have the top down, and you're like, sure, but sometimes it's not exactly clear. It's like, no, that's a 15-foot ledge around the outside of the room. But if you have an isometric view that shows that, and maybe one of the creatures stalking around up there, you can go, oh, cool.
I
So,
remembered one map that I think we've done, but
okay.
it was like a really exceptional, like very special case, which was for the Sandpoint campaign setting book near the end of first edition. They took the Sandpoint map, and like the opening spread of that book is a bird's
Yes.
eye view of the city, and you can see all the buildings and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not cut away, but it is isometric, 3/4 perspective, and lets you see the town with all those vertical details that you wouldn't normally get from the top down view.
I do remember this map. It's a really nice map. I almost
Yeah.
want to try to find it on my computer and show it to folks, but I won't. Go look for it on your own.
Yeah.
Speaking of maps, there is a really cool one in here that's trade routes. I'm going to talk about. I'm not going to show you. If you're watching the video, you know what? Go buy the book. It's worth it. But there is this really cool trade routes that show things like here's the North Tack and the South Tack going through the Inner Sea. Here's the Diamond Webway, which is a trade route across the Moangi Expanse, and just the Varisian Run. Well, where does the Varisian Run start and end? And you can actually just see it by looking at it here and go, oh, okay, that's cool. So depending on the kind of game you're running, you can be like, oh, here's where the ship might have gone to or been from. And like I said, for me, from an adventure writing standpoint, and even from a prose author, I can talk about. We actually have a pirate character, and maybe she's like, yeah, when we're out on the sea, we usually hang around, the South Tack or something, and then we come back to Absalom. So so the sorts of ships we encounter are carrying goods to and from Osirian and Rahadum and Thuvia. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. And so it's things like that, just once again, immerse yourself in the world and are fuel for inspiration to do something very specific and interesting with a specific story, specific story point or beat.
Mm-hmm. It's also, at least for me, just really fun to like follow along, like just where would it like jump out. If you look at this map, there's a bit where the South Tack just kind of breaks away to go to Absalom and comes back.
Mm-hmm.
And just like imagining where would that happen? Would it happen like is there some poor city in between that spot where it goes away that like is missing out on all this trade stuff? And considering all the possibilities, I'm sure that's not always how the South Tack works. I'm sure some people just continue on and ignore Absalom and stuff.
Yeah,
like
just
that.
skip it. Yeah, sure.
It's just fun to like how, I don't know, like you said, just even seeing just a couple of lines on the map to suggest, well, people will travel a lot through here. There's probably some stories that go with that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some boats that go, say, from Andoran to Osirian directly. Mm-hmm. Sure, but that's not a usual trade route, right? That would be like a special delivery sort of situation where it's like, oh, we only deal in these two goods, one from Osirian and one from Andoran, and we just ship them back and forth.
Or that's already your adventure hook, right? Like, hey, I'm a merchant in Andoran who needs something special delivered to Osirian, and all the trade ships that are coming by are only willing to follow the North Tack, and that's going to take too long. So, hey, do you adventurers want to deliver this for me so it gets there on time?
Yeah, that's true. That's really cool. And yeah, this map shows us that maybe that direct route isn't super common, so it makes some sense. Very good. Oh gosh, there's so much stuff. There's a whole layout of cuisine that confirms the presence of purple rice, of like bright, vibrant purple rice in Galarian. And now I want bright, vibrant purple rice.
Yeah, there was a lot of ideas about just this kind of layout for the cuisine, where it's just make a big picture stuff and point at things again. And again, just really fun with the art. I think I'm sure Sonia had a great time getting to order these, and it was really fun to see them come in as well. And just, I don't know, it was also an interesting challenge for our authors. I think this is the first time where I specifically noted like, hey, you're getting paid to write art orders because you will know what needs to be going on here. So for example, the trade section has pictures of like different trade goods, and the author had to like explain, all right, well, here's what silver, here's the information on silver, but also here's what the picture is going to be because it ties to blah 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 or whatever. And knowing what the different dishes looks like and stuff is important, and it's a lot easier for the author who's in that mindset to be able to produce that and share it with us, and then subsequently our artists.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Speaking of, one of the things that I think is really cool is there's a page on architectural styles
Hmm.
that show all these different buildings, and you have a visual example and a description, but also a visual example of looking and being like, this is what New Thassalon architecture looks like, right? When we say this is Thrunic, here's what we mean. If it's a Shelenite structure, this is like what the temple might look like. And you go, oh,
Hmm.
okay. And that again helps for me ground me in this world, so I know what I'm describing, and I can imagine this is amazing for GMs that like to make up their own adventures in Galarian, to be able to have this resource, not only just to inspire them and help describe where they're at, but also just to show and say, hey, look, here you go, here's a picture, this
It'll
is
look
this is
like
the sort
this.
of
Yeah.
building. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big reason why there's just so much more art here. It's much easier to just turn the book and say it looks like this one than it is to like try to describe it.
Gosh, this is so cool. I'm just flipping through here, just having a good old time. Oh my gosh, and games. You have games
Hmm.
in here, like sports games and tabletop games and all sorts of games that are actually like in the book and like in the world.
And
And
some
that
you can actually
is,
play if you really wanted to.
and rules for the games. Like maybe not all the esoteric little tiny rules, but like enough that you could, yeah, you could actually play. There's a game called Gollum, a
Hmm.
big card game, which is cool because I knew about towers, but I didn't know about like, and I'd heard of Gollum, but no one's ever really, as far as I know, described it, at least not very well. And this has all of it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that's neat.
That's part of the fun with it is we wanted there's not that many rules in this book in terms of like, you're not getting new feats or an archetype or anything like that, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that can still end up hitting the table. It
Oh,
includes Gollum. It includes um, the what else is it? The recipes, right? If you really wanted to, you could make the recipe because hey, you're going to Thuvia and you're going to meet with the Thuvian diplomat, and here's what you're eating while you're sitting down, and yeah, that's a lot of
uh-huh.
work, but there are some people that are going to love that, and it's going to work out great for them, and that's hopefully something that's exciting for people, even if you're not getting new spells and new magic items and a new class or whatever. But
I think it's great. I mean, there's game rule information, and that's cool because this is, a game, and new rules is new things we can play with. But this is new things we can play with on the roleplay perspective, and there is no shortage of cool things. Maybe you're an ex-pro Basilisk player.
Mhm.
What's Basilisk? Tell us about Basilisk.
Basilisk is in my head kind of like a weird mix of like rugby and lacrosse,
Mm-hmm.
or um, what's the other sport I think a lot of people have been mentioning is Jai, because they have the little wicker um, scoop that they play with. But it's basically you have this ball and you're trying to get it off into the goal, and there are people there trying to stop you and stuff, but there's also this whole aspect of it's the basilisk ball, and basilisks turn you to stone, so you don't want to look into them. So the moment you have the ball that you're going to use to try to score, you also have to lower your helmet, and it
Mm-hmm.
limits your vision or completely obscures your vision, and you have to rely on your team to get you across the field and try to score, which is like, it's a fantasy sport. There's always some weird twist to it, and I think that's the fun twist for that. You're not doing something like riding on a broomstick or doing anything particularly magical, but there's still like, you wouldn't see this in the real world, and that's fantastical enough to have this helmet here. And there's a weird aspect of having to play effectively blind in some cases with it. And
Yeah.
I'm sure adventurers and the type of people that live in Galarian can handle that pretty well.
Oh, I'm sure. Uh, yeah. There's a bunch about. Oh my god, I'm going through this book. I'm just gushing, y'all. I can't. We had a plan that was semi-structured, and I am completely just ruining it because I'm too enamored with everything that's in here. As I flip through to get to the next section we wanted to talk about, I see
Here,
something
I'll
else.
say one. Let's talk about the spread on All Birth. It's page
Yes.
29. It's a big spooky holiday.
All right.
which is one that we were going to talk about. We were going to talk about this section anyways,
Yeah,
is holidays and stuff. But
this is all
uh,
birth. Ugh.
this is a section where I handed that author the list of all the events that existed and holidays and festivals that existed, and they decided we're gonna focus on Allbirth, which, if you are a deep Paizo lore nerd, is something that was mentioned by name once back in the 3.5 days and was never like referenced again. So
Oh no.
it's a heck of a deep cut, which is great. I love it. It meant that it also was very easy to just like decide what it was and expand on it without worrying about like, oh well, what has been written before. It was literally one sentence before. Great, let's just do whatever.
Let's do whatever we want.
But this is another one of those like isometric pull out spreads of showing a festival in action. And assuming this is pulled up on screen, it's probably pretty gruesome.
It was a moment ago, yes.
It looks like there's blood and stuff everywhere. And that might be true. I don't know. It might be fake blood. It depends on how into Allbirth you are. But Allbirth is kind of our take on Halloween. It's you dress up and you do scary stuff and things like that. And it's really interesting to show what it would look like to be at a party, which it turns out a lot of these are happening in abandoned ruins, because that's a great place to have a spooky party.
Absolutely. That sounds like one of the better places to have it.
And it also includes like a visual reference of maybe the costume that you would be wearing during Allbirth and some of the props and stuff that are used during the celebrations. And it hopefully is just, something that is, again, inspiring to just be like, oh, parties in Galarian can get really weird. It's not just a masquerade ball every time, or it's not just, the Harvest Festival. It's people dressing up, pretending to be goblins and stuff for Lamashtu, and throwing fake blood everywhere and pretending to like cut open a giant's chest and eating it because it's actually, a giant auroch that you killed or whatever, and that's what you cooked. So it I think leads to a certain amount of whimsy and a certain amount of fun and hopefully inspiration with this kind of stuff.
So we have a question from chat, and I looked up the answer for you. So Seth Trek asks, does Pharasma have a version of Dia de los Muertos? Because they need their skeleton carnival. There is a day on the 5th of Farast, which I believe is November. I'm going to look at my calendar here. I'm going to cheat. It's not. 1, 2, 3. Oh, it's in March. Okay, so it's in March. Sorry, I mistaked. So in March.
I never remember those. It's fine.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to remember. But now we have a calendar. The 5th of Farast, and in Nations with the Lady of Graves is prominent, and they take part in this like progression of unforgotten souls. So that sounds very similar to your Dia de los Muertos. It just doesn't happen like the day after Halloween. So different.
And I'm sure there's also like, we're only focusing on the Interseed region. If you look over in Arcadia, I have no doubts there's an equivalent for Pharasma, in the summer or whatever, where it's more lively and colorful and stuff as a celebration of death, rather than like a grim procession out of the funeral home or whatever.
That's true. Yeah, very cool. Well, you'll have to write the Arcadia book, and then we'll know all about it.
Okay. I'll get started on that.
Thank you.
I hadn't thought about doing that before, but now that you mention it, I should do something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Oh my goodness. You're funny. Are
there any other spreads that you really want to show off? Because I think we've been given the go ahead to show off a fair amount.
I've mostly been trying to show all of the not all, but like a lot of the fun artwork that really speaks to me. There's a section in fashion. So like there's fashion throughout this whole book. You're in a section and they're like, and here's the fashion that has to do with the thing we were just talking about. But there is a fashion section, and the fashion section tends to be more like, here's what's currently in style for super high class and like people going like back to school and various, what was they wear. And one of them has accessories. I'm going to show you this just because it's all sorts of little things. It's like, here's like different sorts of tattoos. There's the spectacular spectacles, which are totally sunglasses. There's
the cat's eye glasses. Yeah.
The cat's eye glasses. And it talks about glowing jewels and dueling capes and all sorts of stuff. And I just think it's just so cool. Number 18 is asking, do we have fashions through history? Or so, Luis, this is a question for you. Or are all the fashions in this book current modern era?
I think these are meant to be contemporary fashions, especially because if you read the bit, it talks about the fabulous fashion trends for the coming up 22-23 season.
Yes,
So that's now, that's happening now.
that's
So
super
uh,
super contemporary.
yeah, and I think it'd be hard to try to represent fashions throughout the eras because there's not so much information on the ancient eras. That's basically new campaign settings every time you look back more than 100 years or whatever.
That's pretty much true. One of the things to point out, so I have a bit of a saving grace, is there is a little bit of old in the modern world in the form of New Thassalon. So they were time locked for so long, they had all these super old traditions
Mhm.
and technologies and things that they would use, and all of a sudden are steeped into the modern world. And one of the sections is called Timeless Classics, and it talks about Thessalonian lace and the way that they would incorporate that into their dress. And now they've sort of modernized it to catch up with the rest of the world. But there is a little bit of the old in the new there.
Yeah, there's also an Ifrit man there with a heck of a flaming mustache, which
Yes,
I
the most
I think
fabulous
is
flaming
pretty
mustache
fun.
and
I
ponytail.
also enjoy the writing in this section because it's very much written like what you would see in like a magazine
Mhm.
because it's got kind of punny headlines and stuff. So yeah,
Snow and Armor is saying, so you're saying we can make outfits to wear to our games that are in world accurate? And absolutely, yes, you can.
yes, absolutely. If someone managed to cosplay anything in this, I will like throw myself to the ground in amazement and bow before them because it just looks, it already looks great, and I imagine these things look pretty cool in real life as well.
And even if you don't match a picture exactly, the pictures
Mhm.
have these descriptions that are talking about the types of things. So the Thessalonian lace talks about like intricate patterns in the lace and delicate jewels woven throughout and all sorts of stuff. So you can take hints from what it's talking about and be like, ah,
Yeah.
this is the kind of thing that would be appropriate, and build your own Thessalonian hybrid of new and old. You can build your own, Magambia style student wear where it looks like you're going to be just strolling around the campus with your bag of holding full of all your school books and supplies.
Oh,
All
there's just
right.
so much in here, and it, like, not to discredit the work put into the book, and I just sitting here like, oh, but there could be so much more.
You only have so many pages, so many
It only
words.
has so many pages. I like I said, I think each of these could be their own book, and this all just feels kind of like a concept of like, look, here's some of the stuff that would end up being in a full book if you decide. Like we would have just like 8 to 20 pages of different spellcasting signatures showing off all these different types of
Spellcasting
diagrams.
signatures. Okay, let's talk about spellcasting signatures for a minute because this is very exciting to me for a bunch of different reasons. We have known for a while that when we talk about, hey, when you cast magic, there is a visual and auditory display. Right? It is big, it is flashy, people notice. It is obvious. You
Mhm.
can't, unless you're specially trained and have like, the special
Still spell
still spell
and
and stuff
such.
and abilities to
Yeah.
do that. Like, but even still spell means I don't have to wave my arms about and do
Yeah.
somatic gestures. It's still going to have a manifestation.
Mhm.
And this is really cool because it actually describes the visual manifestation, and it says that there are these runes that appear, and that your magic will always sort of look like your magic. In
Unless you
that,
try really hard to change that.
yeah, unless you tried really hard to change it. And that magic may change over time. So, like when you're an adolescent going to school and learning magic for the first time, your spell signature might evolve in shape, form, or color to something else later.
Yeah.
But
I kind of imagine like the way your handwriting evolves from when you're a
yes,
kid to when you reach your adulthood
that's it.
font, if you
Yeah,
will.
right. Yeah, no, that's a good that's a good example actually.
Mhm.
So in this instance, it's very similar, where it talks about like the different runes that'll show up, the type of movement. Is it fast? Is it slow? The color of it. That basically says that people will read into what the color means, and it actually doesn't mean anything. it's
Yeah.
just it's just the color.
It's also a
But
thing that's just existed forever. If you look
yeah,
at our artwork, it always shows up.
yes,
And I've wanted one to like explain what it is because nothing has explained it so far. But two, also tell you, hey, there's no secrets to it. There's no like hidden code or anything. There's
Right.
if Ezrin looks different when he casts one thing and then this other piece, like why does he have different runes here? It's like that's just how things work. They're different. They're always different. There's no rhyme or reason, and that's fine. We don't ever have to explain it again.
Right. And this kind of does a little bit of that, but it also to me is like it's really interesting to say like here's the personality of the character, right?
Hmm.
A lot of role players, like people that are like, very into the role play aspect, like to describe like here's the actual incantation of my spell, and maybe
Hmm.
repeat it when they cast the spell. They might say here is the exact manifestation. When I cast it, it looks like this. I know I like to do that. Where I say, when I'm casting this spell, here's what it looks like on me. My eyes glow, and this happens, and like here's how it manifests in the world. And this spread gives a lot of information that can sort of guide folks if they're like, "Ooh, that sounds cool, but I wouldn't know where to start." They can look at this and say, "Oh, okay, so I can talk about." Are the runes curvy or spiky? And what does that
Hmm.
mean?
Do they run together or are they separate?
Mm-hmm. They move. The runes are going to move, maybe a little bit, maybe a lot. What does that mean? And they
Hmm.
can sort of come up with their own ideas based on this spread. And I just think it's so cool.
This whole thing is also another super duper deep cut. Ultimately,
Okay.
the name is actually something that Wayne Reynolds came up with. He's gone and talked a lot about his design for the iconics and the stuff that he's illustrated for Pathfinder over the years on Facebook and other places on the internet and stuff. And I happened to read one time he mentioned like, oh yeah, those things I call them spell signatures. They had never had a name before. And I was like, well, if that's what Wayne calls them, that's what I think we should call them.
And
And
that's
that's
it.
where it
That's the
came from.
name.
And it leads to like maybe a little confusion with like signature spells if you're, uh, you know,
Sure.
reading in the core rulebook. But ultimately, I think you understand what it means when a spell signature is like, oh, everyone has their own unique signature. It's going to look different. Great.
Mm-hmm.
That lines up really well. And just having, well, Wayne has this name. Let's use it. Let's make use of as much as of Wayne's materials we can.
And in a way, they're kind of related too. If you have a signature spell and a spell signature, it's
Mm-hmm.
like this is a spell that so naturally works with your spell signature that it is easy to maybe replicate or empower. And one of the things I talked about was sequences of runes might be repeated, especially if it's like a lesser powered spell that's been empowered to be more potent. It might have
Mm-hmm.
those runes repeated as the base of the spell over and over. I thought that was kind of a fun way to do it.
Yeah, I tried. I don't know if it, it asking our art team be like, oh, let's get a bunch of runes and maybe use these. I think if there's um any repeating, I think that the assumption in my head was like, oh, if you see a repeating rune here and there, that's because that's the base for whatever spell they're casting. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're casting summon summon animal, right, it
Right.
always would have this base rune, but maybe summon animal at fourth level would also have that plus an extra 2 or 3 runes that repeat and stuff like that. And it's just fun to think about that. uh, what's mine going to look, it's just another aspect of role play that I think most people haven't had a chance to consider. And like you said, having these guidelines or at least a little bit of an example to work from is hopefully going to lead to a lot of cool ideas for players, but also maybe a lot of cool fan art in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I was definitely like just this section sparked a discussion with a friend of mine who we were talking about what magic looks like and how that works. And I was like, oh, actually, the travel guide has descriptions of spellcasting and what those runes and stuff look like that we see.
Mhm.
So it's definitely informed sort of some decisions that we're making for some other projects that are as of yet unannounced. But that was a really exciting place to see that was already causing like quite a bit of inspiration for us.
That's great. I love hearing that. I love the excitement that I've been seeing around this book, even if people are like, yeah, but it doesn't have like an archetype, but people are still excited. They're I would see screenshots and stuff throughout the internet of like, wow, look at this random goblin superstition. Isn't that great? I love this and stuff like that.
Yeah. One thing that was really also fun that will inform people's roleplay, I think, is a superstitions section.
Mhm.
There's a whole spread of them. From things like number 7 is unlucky to Varisians, and they'll avoid it whenever possible. Because like that's a lucky number to us and
Yeah.
sort of current modern Western culture. It's like, oh, lucky number 7. No,
Or
no, Varisians unlucky. It's bad.
13 being lucky in Katapesh.
Yes, exactly.
It's really hard to see in that picture, but there are 14 pots there, but the 14th one is like smashed, so there's only 13 good pots.
Oh, I see. 13's the charm. Very good.
Yeah, yeah.
That's hilarious. It's lucky isn't lucrative in Katapesh. That's fun. They'll go so far as to tear down a 14th room in a building. What?
Yeah, this is perfect for your superstitious barbarian. You have
Mhm.
20 ready to go superstitions at this point.
Even if they're not from that region, you could be like, "Well, I
I
heard that.
heard.
Yeah, I heard this thing, and I'm not going to take any chances because it
Hey,
could be
wait,
true."
hold on. My split of the gold is 7 gold. No, hold on.
That's fine.
Here, you can hold on to that.
Someone
I'll
else
just take
take it.
6.
I'll take 6. That's fine. I don't need that gold piece. I don't want no 7. Yeah, this is really fun. This is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky buttons for halflings.
Mm-hmm.
Extra buttons
That,
are lucky.
yeah, buttons and halflings have been a thing that I've been like I've been seeing more and more over the Lost Omens days, but partially because a lot of it was written by either Ron Lundeen or Stephanie Lundeen, who seem to love halflings, and I think they share their like ideas of what halflings should be doing. So they kind of built up this halfling lore for a while. But there's also, if you can see, there's a nice picture of all the 8 buttons on the halfling little patch, and then the sad patch of buttons on the next page. They get torn up because superstitions are bad in Galt.
Yeah. Galt, we don't have those superstitions here. You have superstitions. You're breaking some law. You're arrested. Wait, what? Crimes against the state. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter. Oh my goodness. Yeah, this whole thing is just so cool. I'm just having so much fun like reading through here and thinking of all the different things. The open door policy in Taldor, where doors are left unlocked and even open throughout the meal in the evening because, a guest might come by and materialize. And this shows that you're welcome. And even though they almost never do, it's still obviously ensuring continued prosperity. So we're going to do that.
Yeah. I think real world cultures have some stuff like that. I think I've heard like, oh, you set an extra place at the table, even if no one comes to sit at it, just in case a guest comes by and you have it ready to go. That same section also includes one of my more favorite bits of this book, which is the tale of Kagala, which is a bit of in-world fiction. And I know people are always wanting more fiction out of Pathfinder, and I try to sneak it into Lost Omens where I can. And wouldn't you know it, that's a section of the book that's all about folklore and mythology happens to have a nice little folk tale in it, and it's just another fun excuse to squeeze in some fiction in there. But this time it's fiction that people would tell each other in the setting. It's a story you would know, like Paul Bunyan or whatever, and
Right.
I think that adds an extra fun layer to it.
Yeah, that's very cool, especially if you're playing a character from Garund who would have heard this tale over and over. Like, oh, definitely read this. And then if you're at the table with another like role player who likes to do that stuff, you can reference the story at the table, and all the other players are like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's like it's from our homeland. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Very cool. Gosh, you stuffed this book with so many interesting things, and I found, I had to look deep, but I found actual game rule information. There is a ritual called Lucky Month.
Yes.
Where you can try and imbue a lucky charm onto a specific person, and if it works, they will actually have good luck, and if it doesn't, they'll have bad luck, whether they have the lucky charm or not.
Yeah, that's one of the questions that I got asked when outlining this book. It's like, oh, what kind of stuff can we do? James Jacobs actually mentioned like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if there were more stuff like the heart bond ritual, where special events would happen in your life and you'd maybe do a ritual or get a boon for it. And if we had more space in this book, I would have made a lot more rituals, one for your birthdays and one for a wedding and one for a funeral and all this other stuff. But at the very least, the lucky month is there to kind of cover the general, like, oh, an event is happening, you do the lucky month ritual and you create this lucky charm for the person or the people involved, and hopefully wish them well with whatever's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's absolutely, yeah, it's great. I can imagine that this would probably be a very common thing to do when it was someone's birthday. To be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, it's your birthday, so on your birthday we do this ritual for you, and for the whole next month you'll have good luck. So go and be lucky and be prosperous and do things.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's so cool. I'm just
There's a few more pantheons in this book, which is technically rules content. If you're looking to see kind of some more everyday pantheons, the ones that have been featured in other books, like Knights of Lastfall had ones that are very focused on gods that were part of the Knights of Lastfall. What this pantheon is more just kind of a general purpose, like what are the farmers praying to and stuff like that. So I think that's fun, but also still usable by an adventurer if you're really into that.
mm-hmm. Especially if you're one of those who likes to play the adventurer, who's like, oh, I'm just a regular, family person, but I'm adventuring to earn money for my, sister's, spellcasting medical treatment. Like she has some long but very unpleasant disease that like isn't going to go away anytime soon, and I'd like to be able to afford a cure disease. So you might follow the deities of hearth and harvest and
Mm-hmm.
have that be really important to you.
Another rules bit, which is like not at all like big mechanics, is in the next section under nature and animals. There's just a big table of all the animals that you can buy as pets, which includes things like a cat or a dog or a cow. It also includes like an axolotl if you're so into that, or a monkey or a
A
praying mantis.
raccoon.
And that table was like 3 times as long
Oh
before
my
it
god.
turns out that it couldn't fit at all in there. Because they were like, the cat was broken down to like 6 different breeds.
Oh no.
And all this other stuff. And it is a real bummer to have to cut it down. But I know a lot of people just really enjoy having a pet that isn't, you don't necessarily want to play a ranger and have to get an animal companion to have a dog adventure with you. So here's this, and then here's a bit of information on how much food and stuff will be. But like, people love that kind of stuff. People do that in MMOs, right? You buy little pets that don't do anything; they just kind of follow along with you, and that's just really fun. And we wanted to offer that to people here, and hopefully, this is a great starting point. And maybe in the future, when we talk about an animal, it's just like, hey, here's the, I don't know, the fire weasel in this volcanic region of whatever, and you can buy a fire weasel for 2 gold pieces, stuff like that.
Fire weasel. A dinosaur is only 10 gold. No, 10 plus.
10 plus. Yeah.
10 plus.
Depends on which one. So
yeah, you
I'm
get
sure
a little like
a
Procomsognathus or something, or like really tiny, and maybe they're only 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another part of it. There was a bit of granularity that was lost out because there's just not enough space to list every dinosaur and its specific price.
Alpacas are 75 plus gold pieces?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Those are some fancy pacas.
Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit about alpacas earlier in the section.
Mm-hmm.
There's a special Druman breed of alpaca that is got exceptionally soft wool. So like, I'm sure it's a lot of work to get an alpaca.
Probably. This is so fun. There's a special Irisini owlbear just from Irison.
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Even gives you a little bit of information on how to do the stats for that if you wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's some mechanics there, right? It's not ready to go, but it just says, add this adjustment and give them cold resistance. There you go. Now you have a new type of owlbear.
That is so cool. All right, I love this. This is fun.
Are there any details? So, I mean, the broad categories of things like weather and nature and folklore and magic and stuff. Are there any subjects that you think we're missing?
Oh, geez.
Like not like obviously we can't cover every specific detail, and it's like, oh well, you didn't tell me what divine spell signature would look like compared to arcane spell signature or whatever. But like, I don't know if there's. I'm trying to think. I think we covered most topics that make sense.
You covered it to some degree or another. There was currency at some point. Like I was always interested in like, what do the currency from different regions look like?
And there's a couple of different types of coins that you get to see.
And there's a few, yeah, and that like stuff like that was interesting because I think about like American money versus Canadian money and how different it looks, and then
And how,
there's parts of the world where the money that just looks, incredibly different. Although paper money's pretty much the standard, but like different sizes and shapes and like how colorful it is and stuff.
yeah.
So I don't know. That was kind of interesting. There's a little bit I'm looking at right now about musical instruments. A little bit more about different types of music would have been kind of cool.
Mhm.
But there's just so much in here, honestly. The only thing, like you were saying, is I would just want more of it. So it's like, yeah, you talked a little bit about blank topic, but give me a bunch more on that same thing.
I know so the reason this is called Travel Guide is because we
Yes.
had to come up with a different name, because the original idea was to call this the like Inner Sea Almanac. Years ago, this is something that James Jacobs came up with, where he wanted to show off all these details, but he called it the Almanac because Farmer's Almanac has some of the information on like weather patterns and stuff like that, and that is featured here. But this has more than just what an almanac would have. So
Mm-hmm.
we went to Travel Guide, but also he had the idea that, oh, this is a book that we would put out every year. Like we
Oh.
would show you fashion trends for next year and what the current trends in cuisine are. Or like, oh, hey, last year we looked at Absalom coins. This year we get a chance to look at coins in Katapesh or whatever. And
Wow. Yeah.
as much as I would love to do that, that sounds like so much work.
Yes.
But if this book sells well, I would love to like shake Eric Mona and be like, Travel Guide 2. Let me do Travel Guide 2.
Travel Guide 2. Yes. Get an update on stuff. Maybe look at different aspects of things. There's at one point where, and this is just me being a nerd, a lore nerd. You have an Academy uniform from the Academy in
Corvosa.
Absalom, and now I know what that looks like. That's cool. But it also made me wonder, like, what do all the other ones look like? And I know we have school fashion and stuff like that, but I'm like, I want to know all the magical school. I want a magical school book that just talks about all the different magical universities and schools across the whole world, and like all the different things. I don't know. I love drilling down to that layer of deep cut lore just to see like what would it be like to live there. I don't know. It's very exciting to me. Maybe I'm just a big nerd.
I mean, I you were saying that, and I'm immediately like, are there school rivalries like there are in the US?
Mm-hmm.
Or like, and would there be like magical pranks where people are teleporting mascot statues away and putting them in like top of a mountain peak or something?
Yes, it's exactly. It's like, where is this? That's over in Goka now. Good luck. And you're like, but we're in Absalom school. Yeah, you're gonna have to figure out how to get to Goka and get your statue back. And maybe I know that there's a little bit of that in Inner Sea Magic, an old first edition book, and it doesn't talk about like full on rivalries like that, like college rivalries like we would think of them, but just more of how different schools regard each other because of things. So I know like some of the schools look down on the academy because of practical magic, is like, oh, you're sellouts, right? You're just looking at something commercially sellable, versus schools that are like, no, we push the boundaries of what's possible, and we're always looking for like cutting edge research into magic. And it's like, oh, okay. So that's always interesting to me.
Yeah. I don't know. If I had my druthers, we'd be looking at like 24 books in the future, one for each of these.
Oh my gosh.
I think we could fill a normal Lost Omens book on each of these pretty handily and still feel like, maybe there's still room for more.
Yeah, one thing that is nice about this, because I think about that from a more practical aspect, and as much as I personally would love to read 24 different books that really drilled super deep into the world of Galarian and fleshed it out, I think for most players this book is going to be fantastic, and I think after they look through it, they will absolutely be thirsting for a travel guide 2, especially if they've got some time in between it. If it comes out in a year or two and they go, it's another travel guide. What else is happening? They'll get really excited because there's just so much in here that you can look at and draw from, and it will inspire a character. If you were making a character and you're like, I don't know what I want to play in, the Absalom Vaults or Abomination Vaults game, or I don't know what to play in Outlaws of Alkenstar, skim through here and see what happens, because you will probably see something that starts to spark your imagination and make you say, oh, that sounds like a lot of fun to roleplay, or that's a really interesting thing, or how would someone like that work in Alkenstar? What would they think? And so I think this is a book just ripe with inspiration for players and GMs alike.
Mm-hmm. Seth Trek is asking if we touched on sports, if there's an equivalent to soccer. And we did touch on it a bit. There's a sport that isn't quite soccer, but it is like a big, like it's got international league called Basilisk. So you can check that out in there and learn a little bit about how it's played and like the different team positions and stuff that comes with that.
The other thing that I don't know if it did Blood Pig make the book, or is that not in
here? It didn't. It's one of those things that I like considered, is that a sport or is that like some cruel game that like,
I think it's a cruel game. I don't know. It's a real sport.
Do people do that for leisure or to like kill time? I don't know if they do. Knivesies made it in, which is kind of a rough, pretty tough, crazy game as well. But like Blood Pig is, I think, a little like an extra step above that. Give me a chance to let me do a whole book on pastimes, and I'll put Blood Pig in there, and I'll give you like 6 other sports. I'll talk about Bound Ball, and I'm sure there's some other sport we can make up. It's just something like, I don't know, wizard fight or something.
Right. I'm just imagining what people will do with this, though, with like even with Basilisk, and they'll be like, all right, so myself and my friends made all new Pathfinder Society characters, and we are the Pathfinder Society pro Basilisk team.
Yeah, or someone will go on Infinite and like flesh out the other teams that exist in the league, right?
Oh, that'd be cool. Like with their own logos and all that stuff. Yeah.
It'd be fun to see all that kind of stuff come up. There's a lot of foundation being set here, and I would love to have anyone, including Paizo or fans, expand on it in any capacity whatsoever.
An entire international Basilisk League manual or book or something, guide. It would be super cool with all the different teams in there. I'd love to see that. That'd be really fun. Number 18 asks, are there formal magical duels?
I'm sure there are. I think there's even like a dueling system in the Game Mastery Guide, but in terms of being described here, there isn't anything here. But that's one of those things that like, of course, in a full pastime book, they would talk about duels and stuff like that. And there would probably even be like rules on how to run your duel, and maybe even like an archetype for like, I'm a mage duelist that's only specializing in dueling people, and you'd get fun options with that. But I can only dream of stuff like that right now.
Only so many pages in the book.
Yeah.
And only so many minutes in the show. So are we done talking about the travel guide for now, and to move on to other?
That's all we can talk about for now. We're technically only doing a preview.
Yes, it's just a preview, but still,
we might come back to it and get more in depth in the future if we feel the need to return to it.
At the very least, I'm sure there will be call outs where I'm like, remember when we talked about that? Here's the thing I did.
Yeah. Here's one fun thing before I go. We go on. I like the Cosmic Caravan being a thing. It's your astrological symbols in Valerian. That was a thing that existed in first edition, but we're bringing them back in 2e. So
I remember writing the rules for those in first edition.
There you go. I'm going to figure out 2, 3, Erastus. I'm trying to figure out what my sign would be. It looks fun. Like I am the wagon. So
okay. What's the significance of the wagon, and does that match you?
It says it symbolically carries a caravan across the sky, and normally I think that would have meanings like, I don't know, you just help people out, or are kind of a solid, what's the word I want to say? You're a solid presence in people's lives and stuff. And if you have the right background, it also lets you cast Longstrider once per week, so that's pretty fun.
Well, our birthdays are very close together, so I am also a wagon.
There you go.
And I'd say, I don't know, it works because the very brief description here, it says symbolically carries the caravan across the skies. And I don't know, both of us seem to be very leadery hype people, right? I mean, we're on No Direction.
Yeah.
So, we're very much about like helping carrying everyone. I'm like, come on, let's go. Let's do the next thing. Let's play the next game. All right.
Yeah.
Travel Guide 2. Let's
And
do
I
it.
think that means also Ryan is a wagon. So like, there you go. I think we'd all be wagons.
Quite possible.
That makes a lot of sense. But I'm sure there's a couple of I don't know, bridge followers out there that are thinking, that's just like a wagon to think like that.
just like a wagon. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, it's time for Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News. Pathfinder News.
Hey, it's the Pathfinder news section where we talk about all news related to Pathfinder and Paizo and stuff going on in the Paizo sphere.
Yes.
And there's not much news. Actually.
No, we just had Gen Con. All the news is Gen Con.
And we had a whole episode dedicated to all the news that just happened. So you can go back to 2 weeks ago and listen to that.
Mhm.
I wasn't there.
I know, we
I was
missed
making
you.
news. I was making news at Gen Con.
But Alex got to join me, so hopefully people enjoyed him on the show. He is an energetic personality, so he really keeps the show going.
Yeah. Definitely not a wagon like us.
No.
No, I guess there's some news at Gen Con. Lost Omens Firebrands, cool. In terms of other news going on, there are two big things going on. The Kineticist playtest, which I'm sure you talked about quite a bit in the last episode, which happened to... Did the playtest come out like right before that episode?
It came out the day of, so it came out earlier that afternoon.
Scrambled, read through this.
Yes, the two of us read through it. We gathered our thoughts, and I rambled on about it quite a bit, and Alex talked about it in a more organized fashion. And we really like it. The TLDR, you can go back and listen to it, but the TLDR is we both really like it, but we have some concerns about how it functions in the math. So you can listen to that.
That's playtest for you. That's exactly what is meant to happen, is you figure out what you like, what you don't like, and the concerns, and hopefully it comes out better at the end. I actually ran a game for my home group the last 2 sessions where one of my players like, I want to play a kineticist. Can I include that? Can I swap out my character in our campaign for kineticist for a couple sessions? And that feels weird. Let's just do a different game for like 2 sessions. I'll do a one shot that took us 2 sessions, of course, because that's how sometimes one shots work.
Right.
And we played a kineticist, and that was fun to see. But those of you playtesting know that the playtesting is ending soon. The playtest is over on September 5th. So have your games in, have your feedback in by then. There's a class survey on there where you talk about the class specifically. There's also an open response survey where you talk about anything else that you might have thoughts about when it comes to the kineticist class. If it wasn't featured in the class playtest survey, get your information by September 5th, as I mentioned. That's 2 weeks from now. So by the time that we're doing our next episode of No Direction, the playtest should be over. So get on it, get your information out there. I highly recommend just letting people know what you feel, even if it's just like, I just had a lot of fun running around with the thing where you can shoot fire jets out of your feet and fly forever. That's still valuable feedback.
Yes.
Just knowing what you did like, that means that, hey, the things that are working right now can continue working the way they are in the future, and that we can focus on other stuff. That's always pretty helpful to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I read there's a bit on Reddit, someone on the Riot Games development team for their card game Runeterra, one of the developers hopped on once and talked about how they share feedback internally and what they're kind of looking for as developers, the kind of stuff they're looking for. And this is, of course, talking to video games, but I think a lot of it applies here, is don't just say like, oh, I didn't like this, or I did like this. Explain what it made you feel, or what your concern was with something. Like if you're feeling like, hey, you can just say, I don't like the kineticist, or you can say, it feels like the kineticist's damage is leaving me behind, even like the monk and the rogue, and saying stuff like that is a lot more helpful than just do this or give them back burn, right? Stuff like that.
Right, yeah. Like make a suggestion on maybe what burn could do, or what do you want to
Mhm.
see burn do, or
Yeah.
how do you want to see
Or
that
why do
work?
you miss burn?
Or why do you miss it? Yeah.
Knowing that, it helps a lot. So
Yeah.
uh, share your feedback, or at least have fun playing the Kineticist, and look forward to Rage of Elements next year.
I absolutely will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I was trying to get it on the playtest and we had to kick it. So hopefully we can finish it, that we can actually do it before it ends so I can give official feedback after I've actually played through. We're doing a Ruby Phoenix tournament. And so what we decided to do for one round is make, like, everyone makes a kineticist character as a team of kineticists. And we're trying to cover all the elements that we can. And then we're going to take that team and do stuff that we would do. Because like Ruby Phoenix tournament, especially we're still in the first book, we're still on that beginning island, has so many different things you could possibly do that we're not going to get to them all.
Are you going to basically play a different team from your own campaign for a little bit? You're going to like do a side story of like, oh, well, this other team was doing stuff.
Yes. Yeah. We're just going to segue over to a different part of the island and a different team doing cool Ruby Phoenix tournament stuff. That isn't our main team.
This team ran into a giant T-Rex. Time to fight.
Yep. And we get, exactly. And we get to do that encounter with these kineticists and then come back to our regular team later. And that way they still we still got to advance our AP, but and our regular characters get the experience for that. But that way we're not missing a week and delaying it, but we still get a play test. And that's, it's going to be very cool. So I'm looking forward to that. And I even hinted to the GM, hey, if you wanted, you could just level them up later in like book 2 or 3 and have us fight them again. Like, oh, that's our old team.
Even if you don't get a chance to actually play with the kineticist, reading it and offering feedback is still really helpful. So do what you can. Or not, it's a lot of work to do that. So instead, you might consider looking over to Humble Bundle and looking at the new Humble Bundle that Paizo has for Pathfinder, the Strength of Thousands bundle, which is, as it sounds like, all about Strength of Thousands. It's very Manga Expanse focused and has access to the core rulebook and the APG and the Manga Expanse Lost Omens book, which is, not to toot my own horn, but I think one of the better books that Paizo's ever put out. I like it quite a lot.
It's that whole series of books, the AP, the Manga Expanse book, are some of the best work that Paizo has done on second edition. So this is definitely, if you haven't checked those out, this Humble Bundle is a good way to go do that.
Yeah, and it gives you like it notes the full AP in PDF format, so you can jump in and start playing, and also know the whole setting right away. You have everything you need to know to get started with the game and immediately jump into what I consider probably one of my favorite APs of all time for Pathfinder. And I am kind of just saying that because I did contribute to it, right? I wrote the fourth adventure, something, transparency. Hey, I write for a lot of this stuff. Wouldn't you know it?
Wouldn't you know it?
Yeah. But yeah, those are the only two big things going on in terms of Pathfinder news that I can think of, at least from Paizo. I'm sure there's always stuff going on Infinite. Go ahead and check out Pathfinder Infinite and all that stuff. But Paizo is in a kind of recovery period between having just given you all this information at Gen Con, and probably will start sharing more information in the future with more stuff. Like, I don't know, another Lost Omens book sometime. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, I can't announce it yet, but you know what it is. I'm trying to read your mind right now.
I know that Paizo likes to put out another Lost Omens book once they've released a Lost Omens book. So
they just keep doing it one after the other.
Doing it. I don't know if that's some big industry secret, but they release more books as time goes on.
You heard it here, folks. That's the Pathfinder news. Paizo will release more books.
About 18 is asking, how is hiring going? Yeah, for those of you not in the know, there are a number of open positions over at Paizo. They are actually still up as I'm looking at them now. That includes a position as an editor or a position as a production designer, which would be working with the art team. So if you're interested in that kind of work and wanting to work with Paizo, you can head over to the Paizo website and go to the careers page and see yeah, maybe there's something there that works for you. I know there are always opportunities that pop up on there, and it's just it's a good chance to maybe get your foot in the door with Paizo and Pathfinder and yeah, the RPG business or gaming industry as a whole. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. No new hires to announce yet, though. So,
No
because
new
we would
hires to
definitely
announce.
tell you.
Yeah, or Paizo would have told us by now as well too. So
That's right. And we'll definitely try to drag whoever they get onto the show to talk about, so you work for Paizo now. So more news on that hopefully next episode, but who knows?
What random project did they throw on your lap on day one?
I got thrown redacted. Great. Cool. Yeah.
That seems to be a fun thing that happens. Is here's the thing, it's mid-production. Let's work on it.
Go
And
finish.
it's a good learning experience.
Finish that. Make it a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's Paizo making more books all the time.
What? This is absolutely news. All right, we're gonna move on to wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups, wrap-ups, and shout-outs.
Thank you for joining us for No Direction episode 283.
283?
Travel guide. Yeah.
I don't even know if I put the right number in the announcement. No, I did. Okay, 283.
283. Yeah. And before we go, we like to shout out to things that we enjoy, whatever they may be, whether or not they're related to Pathfinder or RPGs in general. And I think I have a shout out that I think I did before, but I want to shout out again, just
Sure,
because I've been enjoying it so much, which is the Dice Will Roll podcast, which is, I think it purports itself as the queerest Pathfinder podcast out there. So that's pretty fun. They're currently running through the adventure path you mentioned earlier, the Fist of the Ruby Phoenix adventure path. And they are so far pretty far into the first adventure, and I've just been having a lot of fun listening to them. I think they've been doing a lot of great stuff. They have 2 APs under their belt before that, which include Extinction Curse and Kingmaker, and I think just check them out. They're pretty fun. They are rather crass, so if you're someone who blushes to when it comes to a bit of a blue language, seeking language, be aware of that. But I think they make the game pretty fun, and even as someone who knows that AP pretty well, they are shaking things up by introducing different teams and other stuff going on, and it makes it still pretty fun to listen to. And the casts there are just really fun. I like their characters and what they're doing. So check out Dice Will Roll. Just a fun podcast.
Very cool. Very cool. I have a couple different shout outs. One is we're talking about the Kineticist playtest earlier. And for those of you who want far too many of my opinions, including a brief history about the Kineticist, you can check out the Rise of the Rule Lords Unchained podcast that just went out the other day. Legendary versus playtest Kineticist with me as a guest star. And we basically start with it's the first edition Kineticist, because you have the interpretation that myself and a couple other people did for Legendary Games called the Legendary Kineticist, as well as the Kineticist playtest by Paizo, and how they are 2 completely separate approaches to how to solve this problem of, I have an elemental focused character that does things, and what do we do? And I'm going to tell you right now, I really like both approaches. I like the one I did because it was more of a direct port. And I like the way Paizo has treated the Kineticist as just a whole new way of thinking about what a Kineticist is and does. And I really enjoy both of them. And we go into a bunch. We break it all down. So if you're a Kineticist fanatic, absolutely check out the Rise of the Rule Lords podcast. So that's out there. The other thing I wanted to bring attention to is that Vellum and Lace just released yet another episode. So we went on hiatus for a little bit, and then we released a bundle with all of the different episodes of Vellum and Lace to get you current. And we just released a new one, and I didn't pull it up, so I'm vamping to try to see if I can find it.
I can pull it up for you. Just tell us about it.
Yeah, so it picks up where the last one left off. And I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but essentially we spent a lot of time in the first I'm going to call it arc, like meta arc, with
Mhm.
the sisters being separated. And this is when they finally get back together. So this is the aptly titled reunion. It is episode 8. And you can go out there and catch up also with the bundle. Some of our earlier ones have made Electrum status, so there are readers out there reading.
Yeah.
So that is a
Pretty
thing
cool.
you can take a look, and it's been a ton of fun to write. So go check out Reunion and see what happens when the sisters get back together and start enjoy our next meta arc, which should be a lot of fun, and probably include stuff directly from the travel guide as we're going through it, going, this is perfect, we're going to use this, we're definitely going to do something with this kite festival. This is so cool.
There's a point where someone holds up a bottle of Carpendin.
Yes, that's right.
And brings a lot of attention to it and then winks.
But I have got a real bottle of Carpendin, not just bubble wine. Okay. And Angelica will steal it and smash it on the pretentious guy's head, and off they go. But yeah, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Definitely check that out on Pathfinder Infinite. It's been a lot of fun to write, and I hope you have fun reading it. And that is it. That's what I got.
That's it for other shout outs. I guess the only thing to shout out is, I don't know, the No Direction Network itself.
The No Direction Network itself. If you enjoyed this show and you cannot get enough of us, I implore you to join our Discord. The easiest way is to head over to our website at nodirectionpodcast.com and click on the giant Discord link, and you can join the chillest, coolest Pathfinder Discord server out there, chatting with us about all sorts of stuff. Pathfinder, Starfinder, Essence 20, all sorts of role-playing games. And as a special bonus, if you're a patron of No Direction, if you like us that much that you're like, hey, we give you some money, we appreciate that, because that helps us keep our equipment up to date and working. And you can join us in mere moments in the Patrons Private Sanctum, a special show just for our patrons where we talk about whatever it is you ask us to talk about. And when you don't, we ramble on for 30 minutes, which is also entertaining.
Yeah.
So it's a much more casual hang sort of atmosphere, and you can come do that. And all you got to do is become a patron, attach your Patreon account to your Discord account, and you will automatically be invited to join the Patreon backers group, which includes the Patrons Private Sanctum.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we do some other shows here at the No Direction Network, like Legend Lore and Adventurous and Beyond and all that.
So many other shows. And blog posts.
Podcast.com.
And blog posts all the time. Blog posts about
a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, Pathfinder stuff, adjacent stuff, third party making stuff for your game table to make it better.
You said adjacent, but I thought you said Jason stuff. I'm like, yeah, Jason.
People named Jason make things on the blog. It's fun. No, like adjacent.
Yeah. But yeah, we also have stuff from Jason Keeley. So
oh my gosh.
if you're here for Jason Keeley stuff, then so be it, but also welcome.
Yes. So number 18 rightly says it's a full-time job to keep up with No Direction. Yes, there's a lot of content that we're releasing, so go check it out.
So enjoy, and yeah, I guess it's time for us to hop off to get to that. So I think, what do we say here?
We say that if you need to find the path, you need No Direction.